Hey everyone, James Niggemeyer here. Thank you for tuning back into my YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscription button. That way you won't miss any of the content that I'm putting out on Wednesdays and Saturday evenings. Today I'm going to do another episode of Windshield Time. One of the viewers wrote in the comment section that he'd like to know what are some search baits that I like to use for smallmouth bass. Because I'm from Texas, I don't fish smallmouth very often, except for when I go north on was the Bassmaster Elite Series and now the FLW Tour. Over the 13 years on tour, I have had several trips to the North Country, to the Great Lakes and other types of places, and I've had some decent finishes. And the smallmouth bass is kind of an interesting creature, in that it is definitely a bass, but it definitely is not exactly like a largemouth. That being said, let me get into my top 5 search baits. I'm not necessarily going to break it down as far as seasons or seasonal patterns. I'm just going to give you my top 5 search baits. Number 1, for me, I generally love to throw a jerk bait for catching smallmouth, and that goes year-round. Water temperature makes no difference. It really doesn't matter what the water temperature is or what time of year it is. When it comes to smallmouth bass, my number 1 search bait is definitely a jerk bait. And the reason I like the jerk bait is because the jerk bait can draw a reaction strike from smallmouth. It may not be the best presentation for that given day, but you can get them to come up to it, show themselves. They'll roll on it, flash on it, they'll kind of follow it behind the bait, and that's how I can tell, as far as searching for smallmouth bass, that's how I can tell that there's fish in the area. And in that way, it's my number 1 search bait for smallmouth bass. My number 2 really could be my number 1, but it's limited in when it's effective, and that's a top water bait, like a Strike King Sexy Dog or a Splash Popper type bait, little chugger. But baits like that, where I can actually get fish to come up again and show themselves. And one of the things that I want from a search bait is I want the bait to help me cover a lot of water and really tell me or let me know whether there's fish in the area. So those are the 2 things that I definitely don't want to use something that's really slow. If it has a slow fall, or it's something that takes time to work, it's just kind of a methodical bait, I generally don't gravitate towards those types of baits. So number 1, the jerk bait. Number 2 is a top water. Number 3 is kind of like a jerk bait, but a soft jerk bait, like a fluke type bait or a Strike King caffeine shad. And those are tremendous because, again, the smallmouth are such visual feeders. That's why the jerk bait works well, that's why the top water works well, and that's why a soft jerk bait works well, because they see that thing from a long distance, and generally smallmouth are in clearer water. So I want something that I can, get them to come up on. So a soft jerk bait in just a white or a pearl, or sometimes even like a bubble gum will work really well. Something that's got a lot of visual appeal. Fish can see from a long distance and they can come to it. And a lot of times they eat it, and sometimes they don't, but they show themselves, they roll on it, much like the top water and the jerk bait. So search baits right there. Those are my top 3 search baits. Number 4, I'm gonna say, would have to be, and honestly, number 4 and number 3 are interchangeable because they're both such tremendous search baits for smallmouth bass. And honestly, this one's just as good for largemouth. But getting lower in the water column, I definitely would choose a Strike King Rage Swimmer or boot style swim bait, like a Swimmin' Caffeine Shad or those Kitech style baits that you can put on a jig head. Those baits are tremendous at getting fish to react, getting fish to bite. And the beautiful part about that is now I'm off the surface, now I'm off the shallow water column, though I could fish it up shallow. A swim bait on a jig head, like a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce jig head, open hook jig head, I can throw that out there, let it sink to the bottom, and I can slow roll it down on the bottom. And so that makes that a real versatile bait. The other thing I can do with it, I can just throw it up there in shallow water, and I could fish it like a spinnerbait if I needed to. So definitely the swim bait is a tremendous smallmouth search bait. The last one is a drop shot. And you might be thinking, well, I thought you said you don't want something that falls slow and those types of things. But if you put on a heavy weight on a drop shot, a lot of times you can get those fish. You can throw it out there, it'll fall to the bottom real quick, and you can get those fish to react to it. The drop shot is a tremendous reaction bait for smallmouth, because if you throw it around them, they'll just see that thing just plummeting to the bottom, and they'll just run over there and grab that drop shot. And you could draw a reaction strike from a otherwise finesse bait. You could also do that with a tube. With a heavy tube, you can throw it out there, and then it'll just fall to the bottom or spiral to the bottom, and then you can just pop it up. And once you pop it up, you can draw a reaction strike too. So you're actually fishing a finesse style bait or a slow bait fast, in a fast manner. Now with a drop shot, once I get it down to the bottom, I won't work it very far, maybe 5 feet or so at the most, and then I'll reel it in and throw it to an area where I believe the next fish might be located, or where I believe a fish might be located. So that's really how I would work it, and that's the same thing with the tube as well. I will definitely have to say the jerk bait, the top water, and if you feel like the soft jerk bait is kind of like, oh, come on, James, that's just another style of jerk bait, give us something else, then I'll say a spinner bait. A spinner bait, a 1/2 ounce with a white and chartreuse painted blades. White and chartreuse colored skirt, or maybe just chartreuse blades with chartreuse skirts, something bright. The big key is definitely remembering that smallmouth are such visual sight feeders. And so to get them to react to a bait, you definitely want something they can see from a long ways off. So again, the jerk bait, the top water, the spinner bait and or soft jerk bait, and then the swim bait, and then lastly is the drop shot. The drop shot's tremendous because you can work it down low and slow on the bottom if the fish are really lethargic. But if the water temperature's warm, you can throw it out there and let it go to the bottom and get a reaction strike from those smallmouth. So those are my top 5 search baits for smallmouth. Some honorable mentions: a spy bait is pretty cool. A spy bait is something over the last couple years I've been throwing, and definitely worth mentioning. It's a little bit on the slower reel, but it's a bait that you can keep on moving. The spy bait is something that you continue to reel along the bottom or reel slowly, and those little propellers are starting to go, and that fits into my criteria for a good search bait, and that is a bait that I can move and cover water with. Because number one, you definitely want something that the fish will want to bite, but also that they'll react to and come to. So that's it for now, guys. Top 5 smallmouth bass search baits. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And until next time, thanks for watching and good fishing.